So let's tell you today's story. I got this the other day from my friend the Bianchi Winner, the Mashpia in Melbourne. It's a Montreal story. Yeah, translated. Everybody here, I would assume, remembers Rav Pinchas Hirschberg. Yes, Chief Rabbi of Montreal, Talmud, one of the outstanding Talmidim of the Yeshivas Chacham in Lublin, Rav Meir Shapira, a Baki b'Shas, and not just Shas, but the Shoinim word for word, as you all know. And I'll tell you, a very humble man that paid the price. He paid the price because he was considered to be a godel. He was considered to, and he was a godel in the literature world. His picture still is proudly displayed on the wall of Beis Yaakov. I'm not sure if there are his pictures. There maybe it is. Could be it is. But Rabbi Hirschberg there with the Gedol Yisrael, but when he became a Lubavitcher, became a Chassid, he was demoted. And he was no fool to know that's going to happen. And nonetheless, Lubavitcher, so he still loved this Nusach, but he became a Chassid. Now this is apparently the story that really, he says, it's from then he became the Rebbe's Chassid. With this story, and it's related by Rabbi Meir Plotkin, who was close to the Rabbi Hirschberg, used to bring him to the Rebbe, and so on. The one that brought him to the Rebbe was Rabbi Shvei, Rabbi Isaac Shvei. Rabbi Shalom worked in about a year. His passing was a great loss. So here's the story. He was the Rosh HaBezdin of Montreal, Rabbi Hirschberg, and the Rabbi Rosh of Canada. Elul 1965. Rabbi Hirschberg had returned from a visit to Romania. By the way, he wrote a book, which is translated, his story, his survival, the Holocaust. Wonderful book. Didn't read it, but excerpts were read to me by someone who did in stories. His diary. So this is 65. He'd come back from Romania in those days, friends. Romania was closed. The borders were closed. But he was able to get in there because he joined the son of one of some wealthy businessman in Montreal that was there on business. And his son came along, this fellow, I don't know what this, maybe Chaim would know who that might be, 1965. Rabbi Hirschberg joined. So when he was in Romania, he saw the situation of Yiddishkeit for Yidden there. It was very difficult. And he was deeply impressed when he met the SHOCHET, the local SHOCHET. And he gets up every morning very early with Mesiras Nefesh and Shechts. He comes back to his house after a few hours. He organizes and learns for children, boys and girls, teaches with the Torah. And this SHOCHET, quoting Rabbi Hirschberg, invested in his students, boys and girls, Chassidus and Yiras Shamayim. Rabbi Hirschberg related with it was very inspired, was very deeply moved and impressed. And as for his own children, he tried his best that they should not interact with the street, with the world outside. Truth is, not with non-Jews, not even with Jews. And he was successful. His children were growing up like from kids in Romania in those days, 1965. So before he left Romania, the SHOCHET said he wants to speak to him for a few moments in private. So they entered into a room, closed the door, and the SHOCHET pours out his heart about the difficulties that he's experiencing, and especially his worry, deep worry over the education of his children. As you see, he said to Rav Hirschberg, I'm trying to prevent my children from engaging the world out there, but this is turning their lives into a prison. And the task becomes more difficult with the passage of time. They're getting older. I want to leave Romania. I'm asking you, please, for my sake and my children, help me get out. And the only way I can get out is if you'll speak to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and ask him in my name that he should get me out of Romania. The borders were closed. You couldn't go in or come out. I know that he's able to. I cannot tell you how, but he knows how. The Hirschberg said, yeah, okay, as soon as he gets back to America, he's going into Yechidus, which had already, an appointment would already been established earlier, and promised the SHOCHET that he will speak to the Rebbe about this. The Hirschberg explains to the, I guess to Mayor Plotkin, what was the Yechidus that he had already, the appointment that he already had before he went to Romania. The story behind that is as follows. I, since Rabbi Hirschberg had the merit to be by the Rebbe in Yechidus a number of times. Before I went to Romania, I wrote to the Rebbe the following letter, and I said to him that whenever I come, we speak mainly about matters pertaining to the community matters. In Yoni HaKlal, and I haven't had the occasion to speak to the Rebbe in learning. And I added my letter to the Rebbe that I've had the opportunity to speak with many Gedolei Yisrael of our generation, I guess even the previous, in learning. But with the Rebbe, I never had this chance. He'd come to Fabrengens, but he never had the opportunity to talk, discuss Torah. It's called Reden and Lernen, talk and learning. And I'd like very much if the Rebbe would agree, I could come once to the Rebbe and the topic would be, we won't talk about community work, but learning. And the Rebbe agreed. And this was the Yechidus that he's going to have after he comes back from Romania. The Hirschberg continues relating the story. So when I went, it was in Yechidus since 1965. So first the Rebbe asked me, so what topic do you want to speak about in learning? So I told the Rebbe that it's 30, 40 years that I'm literally wandering around with many questions. And all the great Gedolei Yisrael that I've asked, either they had no answer, or the answer seemed to me forced, not smooth. The Rebbe said, they didn't know. And here you expect to get the Yeshua, the salvation. I said, yes, the Rebbe, here. I started to present to the Rebbe my questions. So it's fascinating to listen to the description here. The Rebbe is sitting here very calmly and listening without even furrowing his brow. I'm not seeing the Rebbe like concentration. They were complex questions. And you and I would not be following, obviously, even the question. And for moments, as Rabbi Hirschberg, I thought that he wasn't listening. But it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, so I didn't interrupt and say, excuse me, listening, you're paying attention. Of course, I wouldn't do that. And I just continued to present my difficulty. In 30, 40 years, this go on the Olam. Now, the questions were in Yerushalmi, not Bavli Yerushalmi, which is not properly learned. So I finished presenting my questions, and I began to answer. But as an introduction, he said that all the questions that you ask cannot be answered based on the way you learn, based on the way you're learning it. But if you approach the whole oifen, the way to learn, I guess Yerushalmi, in another way, you'll see that there are no questions at all. And then they began to explain, based on showing me the approach to learning Yerushalmi, I saw that Taka with Rebbe's learning, all the questions it disappeared. It's not a question and an answer, there are no questions. Rabbi Hirschman continued relating the story of the Yechidus. He says, in truth, the Rebbe opened up a whole new way of learning, which in my life I've never heard, which completely illuminated the whole nature of the study of Talmud Yerushalmi. It's only then I began to grasp the great goodness of the Rebbe, genius of the Rebbe. Then I said at the course of the Yechidus, even though we had made up that this would be a Yechidus at my request, devoted exclusively to Torah discussion, I said, Rebbe, I do have a question with respect to Inyone Aklal community. But maybe I shouldn't ask, because he says to the Rebbe, we've made up, the Rebbe devoted this time to me now to speak in learnings. Maybe I shouldn't ask. The Rebbe said, please ask, go ahead. So I told the Rebbe about my trip to Romania, and he wanted to hear details and details. And then, of course, I told him the story of the SHOCHET. And I told the Rebbe the SHOCHET's request that the Rebbe should get him out of Romania. So it's interesting that here, when he asked his questions in learning, the Rebbe answered right away. You heard the story. Just here, the Rebbe paused. It was a long pause. The Rebbe's eyes, lowered. And after a while, the Rebbe picked up his eyes and said to me, say it in Yiddish, what's the nice in Hebrew here? My father-in-law sent shluchim dafke to such places, and I should take them away. But the Hirschsprung says it was at that moment that I saw that he is a true Manig Yisrael, a true leader. And perhaps, says Rabbi Hirschsprung, it was then that my true bond becoming a chassid began. End of story. The story evokes something that the previous Rebbe said, or the Rebbe said about the previous Rebbe, that the most difficult thing for the previous Rebbe in Russia was not his own Mesiras Nefesh, of course, that he faced a firing squad, that he could face, and then in fact was sentenced to be killed, but that he was sending others. That was the most difficult thing. And moreover, when the chassid was arrested and disappeared, another chassid sent in his place. It's kind of what the Rabbi Hirschsprung saw here. Rebbe didn't answer right away. He has to stay there. What's going to be? This was he saw the pain. On the one hand, on the other hand, the Shochet leaves. What's going to be with the chinuch of these children? And it should be added, of course, that the Rebbe's pain is not sitting in Brooklyn and Yid sits in Romania, but with this pain, the Rebbe is giving the koiches and the bracha that his shluchim should be matzliach. I shared with you a story recently, and I don't remember exactly, but the point was in the middle of a yechidus with someone, the Rebbe started crying. Tears started flowing down the Rebbe's cheek, and I remember what it was. Bottom line was that as they were speaking now at the airport, this is in the 60s, there was a young couple going on shlichus, and they were going to some, I don't know where they were going, very far. The thing is, this was a family, all the children went on shlichus. This is the days where no fax and no phone. You went on shlichus, to overseas, difficult places. You didn't even speak. You saw each other once in a year, once in 2 years. And the parents, the children were crying. There was a big schus to go on shlichus. They were crying. And the Rebbe just started crying in the shins. Explain. So it's not like, he sits dispatching soldiers in the front. Like the Israeli officers, they go in the front. The Rebbe said this many times. He goes with every shliach. And the disappointments and the pain and the triumphs, all of it, he feels is part of and gives the bracha to. And that's what Rabbi Hirschsprung saw in that moment. That's a manik, that's a nasi v'akor. That's a true leader. All right, friends.